Wormhat. This is a video on heart versus mind, and this is a great topic. I'm surprised I haven't talked about it before, but it's something that I think about every once in a while, and it is a big part of the deception and biology deception, which is just a great topic. They want you to think that they have the human body all figured out, but they don't even know what sleep is. If they don't even know what sleep is, they can't tell you anything. And they just keep repeating over and over the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. That's literally sum all of your education. It's like a weird meme. I see people talk about that constantly. And the heart versus the mind is just a great proof that what they tell you is a bunch of BS, and they're trying to sell you some sort of story or deceive you in a way. And a great deception of modern day biology is they underplay the importance of heart and they way overplay the brain. And I fell victim to this. I used to think that the most important thing in the world is to be the most smart person ever, to have the biggest brain, to know all the little factoids, every little what you think is a truth, to just gather them all up in your brain. It's just like this big storage container of things that can make you look smart. And most of what you're learning is, I mean, this is the way that Satan works. If you lust after somebody that's a sex symbol, the joke's on you because that person's a tranny. If you think that being the most smarty pants ever, if you think that that's the most important to you, what Satan's going to do is going to fill up your mind with things that inflate your ego, making you think that you're the most smartest, but really what you're filling your mind with is a bunch of garbage. It's not even true. And at the same time, downplaying the heart. They want you to think that mind is everything. They want you to think that the only reason that you see stuff around you, the only reason that the world exists, they want you to think is because of your mind. And I think it's way overplayed, the importance of mind. And I think that the mind is much more of a trap than the heart. And again, the heart just gets downplayed as it's just what pumps your blood around, which is probably not true at all. I mean, it does pump your blood around, but it's not true at all that like that's the end of what your heart does. You know how when you feel things very strong, you feel it in your chest. I mean, you almost feel it in your stomach type area sometimes, but your heart is an electrical organ. I mean, so here's just one thing about the Bible before I get to the electrical part. Heart appears in the Bible 895 times. I don't know if that's exactly the word heart coming up, because if there's like hearth in the Bible, that might come up too. The point is, there's a lot of talk of heart in the Bible, and the Bible never talks about the brain. The Bible does talk about the mind. I cut off the important part of this. There were 139 instances of the word mind, I guess, but still way less, like 140 versus almost 900. Why does heart get talked about so much in the Bible, and the mind, sure, it gets talked about, but not nearly as much as the heart? And today, just think of how flipped that is. People think of the heart as just this organ that pumps blood, and that's it. That's what most people think. And they inflate the mind as the greatest thing. Pacemakers prove that the heart is electrical. And really, you just have to remind yourself that what modern day science does is they claim that what they think today is the truth and it's so good. But then if you just go back 50 years in the past or 100 years in the past, you see that they thought completely different things. And at that time, they said that they had the right answer and that what they were doing was the best. So modern day scientists, modern day physicians, they're always going to pretend to know the right answers, but the truth is not that. And just the pacemaker is a great example that I think of for the heart is an electrical organ. We use a pacemaker which shoots out electrical signals to tell it what to do. What if the whole thing about blood and hemoglobin, and there's no way that we can take all of what they say to be 100%, but maybe the heart has something to do with electrically charging our blood, or I'm not certain, but the blood is where our spirit is. From what I've read in the Bible, the blood is where your spirit is. So the fact that your heart is the blood organ, the one that moves your blood or spirit around your body, it should show you that that's a very important part of your body. It's not just a pump, it's the center of what circulates your life force through you. And your brain can't exist without your heart. I thought of Pinky and the Brain. Okay, we got the ball earth thing. The paperclip is probably some sort of symbol. I don't know, Operation Paperclip, what that's all about. But in this show, Pinky and the Brain, they tell you in the introduction, they say one is a genius, the other's insane, but they don't tell you who is who. One of them is the genius and the other one is insane. And the whole joke of the show is that the brain is the one that's actually insane and comes up with these crackpot mastermind, hate the word master, and but anyways, this one is the insane one, but he thinks that he's the most smartest because the brain is inflated, and Pinky is supposed to come off as really dopey, but really Pinky ends up having most of the impact, like kind of ends up doing most of the work, but in a goofy sort of way. Anyways, I kind of think of that Truth in Plain Sight. They tell you that one is a genius, the other's insane. They don't tell you which is which. Mental masturbation is something that I heard a lot of talk of when I was in grad school. Some of the dumbest people I know have PhDs in very high level things, sciences, and they're dumb. They're really dumb. A lot of them are really horrible teachers. They can't explain anything for anything. The worst teachers I ever had were when I took higher and higher. The higher the classes I took, the worse the teachers got. And it's an emperor has no clothes type thing where they really, just because somebody has a piece of paper that says they're a smarty pants doesn't mean anything. And they might think that they're super smart, but I guess this is where it's worth talking about how on this earth, this screwed up earth, think about how silly this is. I love the irony of these things. If somebody likes to go around and brag about how smart they are because they're a rocket scientist, how funny is that when you know the truth that none of that stuff exists? When somebody takes a higher division class in orbital mechanics and they go brag to all their friends about how super smart they are because of their class in orbital mechanics, how hilarious is that when you know that gravity is fake? So I just like to find the irony in this stuff. The brain gets way overinflated. Pride probably comes from the brain. And I used to be somebody that did this. Mental masturbation, the act of engaging in useless yet intellectually stimulated conversation or work, I would say. And usually as an excuse to avoid taking constructive action in your life. I like that part. Yeah, it's just where you want to inflate your ego through being the most smartest. What you're talking about might not even exist. I remember taking upper division classes in modern physics and thinking how smart I was to be in a modern physics class, and now I cringe at that stuff because I knew at the time it didn't make sense, and they would teach you about stuff. Oh, let's teach you about this paradox. Okay, those should have been big alarm bells for me. What the heck am I doing with my life? Learning about theories that have paradoxes in them, and it was my own doing. I wanted to inflate my ego of my brain. The ego comes from the brain. Intuition, I think, comes from the heart. Intuition is a process that gives us the ability to know something directly without analytical reasoning. People put way too much emphasis on the brain, not enough emphasis on the heart. If we just listened to our heart, could have saved so much strife. Because the brain can be tricked and programmed. That's the thing about the brain. Your brain can be tricked and your brain can be programmed. They tell us that the ancient Egyptians didn't think much of the brain. When creating a mummy, they tell us that they scooped out the brain through the nostrils and got rid of it. And maybe it's because they knew that the brain can lie to you. The brain can deceive you. And maybe that's why they didn't find much importance of it, not because they didn't think that it did anything. It's probably not because they didn't think that because sometimes you hear stuff like, oh, they thought that the brain just created your mucus. I don't believe that. Maybe, though, the Egyptians, they just knew that the brain could be tricked and programmed, and the brain can lie to you, and denial comes from the brain. And maybe that's why they didn't think very highly of it, because the brain does a lot of bad stuff to us. Optical illusions. Optical illusions are so pushed in tranny land, and it's because they use optical illusions to deceive you. And yeah, that's why they're so interested in them. The brain can lie to you. Imagination comes from the brain. It's not reality. I used to live in imagination fantasy land, and now that I don't, maybe my heart is working better now. Maybe I'm more grounded. So the reason I'm doing this video, this isn't exactly what this comment says, but I may as well put it up here. It is written, for they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the spirit, the things of the spirit. And I mean, that this does connect to the heart versus the mind, because as far as I know, our spirit is in our blood, and our heart is much more connected with our blood than our mind is. This says to me that spirit understands spirit and flesh understands flesh. If we are to understand God, who he is, and his word, it must come through our spirit, not through our understanding with the carnal mind, the brain. Yeah, your super smarty pants isn't gonna help you out. It didn't help me out. I was never more confused and lost in this world than when I put all of my importance on my mind. Matthew chapter 6, verses 21 through 23. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also, not your mind. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. The light, and I just picked these next verses because these verses get brought up all the time in Transvestigation. You can really sense evil people just by looking at them. And I wouldn't call that a mind thing, because what the mind does is cast doubt about all this stuff. Your mind is the one that says, well, I don't know, everybody's built differently. Your heart is the one that tells you, bullshit. Men have Adam's apples, women don't have an Adam's apple. Your mind is the one that says, well, maybe. No, shut up, mind. That makes no sense. And the same thing with this. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? And mind versus heart. Your heart sees somebody with wicked eyes and you just feel it like, oh, what is this creep? But then your mind is the one that's saying, well, okay, don't be rude to them. Don't, act normal. That's the bad stuff. You should take your intuition. If somebody looks horribly evil, it's probably because they are. And this just sums it up perfectly. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. Heart over your own egotistical mind. The brain that wouldn't die. This is the type of stuff that they use to program you to think that the mind is the most important. Oh, if you can just keep your brain alive, your whole personality is still there. That's a lie. They can't just keep your brain alive. The brain cannot exist without the heart. And who's to say if you switched out your heart, you would even be the same person? I don't believe in heart transplants personally. I think it's a Masonic hoax. They like to overplay what they can do. If you look over here on the left, how do you even know that that's a real person over there? When they claim to be doing a heart transplant, it's probably just a mock-up, fake. It's probably just a Hollywood, they do these kind of things for the super spooky haunted houses around Halloween time. They'll have a fake surgery, whatever, in the haunted house. It's a Hollywood production. How could you take out somebody's heart and then put in another one? And would they really be the same person after that? People believe that their whole existence is in their mind. And I don't agree with that statement anymore. That's just a sci-fi lie that, oh, you are your brain. No, there's more to the body than just the brain. Here's the first photo. Chris Barnard performs world's first heart transplant. Okay, but they're doing a Masonic handshake right there. That's a Masonic handshake. And they have the reflection. They got to get the reflection. It's just like a Hollywood movie. You watch Hollywood movies, they love to get those shots where the person is there and then their reflection is in the background. This isn't just this is a produced photograph, and they have it exactly how they want it. And there's a big T right here. Moments in history. The caption down here, I don't know if you can read it. Professor Chris Barnard, leader of the heart transplant team, and of course transplant, in a characteristic pose is what it says. Pointing up is the characteristic pose of this FTM. And I'll just read this because it was interesting enough to read. In December 1967, a young woman, Denise Darval, double D, DD, that's 44 for destruction, was walking across the street in Woodstock to buy a cake. I love little details like this. Who knew that she was buying a cake? And why was that ever reported? If your aunt, I'm just throwing this out here, let's say your aunt gets mowed down, walking across the street, gets mowed down and killed. What circumstances arise where it becomes necessary to know what she was doing crossing the street? And who do they track down? And then they're like, oh yeah, my aunt was going to the store to buy some squash, right? How they were walking across the street to buy a cake. How did that information arise? Why is it relevant? Doesn't make sense. When a car struck her, she died in Groot Schuur, whatever, hospital, and in doing so achieved immortality. Wow. By becoming the world's first heart donor when Christian, with 2 A's, Neethling Barnard transferred, another trans word, her heart into the chest of Louis Washkansky. Cape Town has been witness to many historic moments since the day Van Riebeeck anchored in Table Bay. Few, if any, brought more limelight to the city than the heart transplant. And limelight, that's the type of thing that you use with Hollywood. Hollywood, you hear about the limelight. This is just a Hollywood production. For the surgeon, Dr. Barnard, soon to be a household name throughout the world, the heart is merely a pump. Of course, they had to come and say that. That's why I picked this clip, because they've been pushing that agenda, and it's not true. The heart is not just a pump. That is false. It's what they want you to believe. But for those who equated the heart with love and death, the transplant seemed close to a miracle. They love performing their own fake miracles. And that's my last slide. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. God bless everybody.